Hi there. Welcome back to Haunting Vales. Today we're going to talk about the Seaside murder Hercule Poirot mystery. This gripping detective story brings Hercule Poirot, the legendary Belgian detective created by Agatha Christie, to a quiet seaside town where a shocking murder disturbs the peace. Behind the waves and the calm shoreline, secrets are buried deep, suspects are many, and only Poirot's brilliant mind can untangle the truth. In this mystery story, you'll experience all the elements that make Hercule Poirot unforgettable: suspense, crime investigation, hidden motives, and clever twists that keep you guessing until the very end. If you're a fan of Agatha Christie, classic detective cases, or murder mystery storytelling, this Poirot investigation is one you won't want to miss. Before we dive into the Seaside murder, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join us for more Poirot mysteries, Agatha Christie-inspired stories, and timeless crime investigations. Let's get started. Chapter 1. A Holiday Interrupted. The summer of 1936 had brought with it a rare stretch of warmth and clarity to the English coast. With the sun shimmering upon the rolling waves of the Channel, the resort town of Hercule found itself teeming with visitors. Families, couples, solitary travelers, all flocking to the stretch of pale sand and crisp sea air that promised respite from the smoky weight of London and the noise of the industrial towns farther inland. Among those visitors, seeking not merely leisure but the keen delight of observation, was Hercule Poirot, the little Belgian detective whose presence anywhere, even in so innocent a place as a seaside promenade, seemed to draw with it the faint suggestion of mystery, as though crime itself were compelled by fate to cross his path. Poirot had come, or so he told himself, for the benefit of his health. To sit beneath striped umbrellas while savoring the perfection of a delicate cream bun at the local pâtisserie seemed a holiday most agreeable to his palate and temperament. Yet as he sat upon the terrace of the Marine Hotel, his patent leather shoes polished so precisely that they glinted in the July sun, his gaze wandered not only to the waters, but to the people who passed before him. There, in their laughter and their careful gestures, Poirot saw the invisible threads of human folly and intrigue that always seemed to tangle where men and women gathered in numbers. Hercule was not merely a retreat for the middle classes. It was also the playground of those who possessed more money than sense, those who arrived with trunks full of clothes, companions of dubious loyalty, and appetites for gossip as endless as the tide itself. Poirot noticed first the family seated 2 tables away. A stout gentleman with the flushed complexion of one who enjoyed brandy before luncheon, his much younger wife whose laughter was a trifle too loud, and the young woman at their side. She was elegant in a pale green summer dress, and carried herself with the composed detachment of one accustomed to being observed, admired, and envied. This was Miss Eleanor Harrington, only daughter of Sir Geoffrey Harrington, a shipping magnate whose fortune had secured him a place among England's more notorious men of influence. Though no more than 23, Eleanor held herself with a cool self-possession that suggested she had already learned the art of commanding a room without uttering more than a few measured words. She was beautiful in a way that was not merely pleasing to the eye, but magnetic, the sort of beauty that made one ask what secrets might lie beneath it. Poirot observed her calmly, and he also noticed the discreet but unmistakable attentions of 2 men seated at a distance. One was a handsome fellow of the sporting type, bronzed from sailing, with the careless confidence of the idle rich. The other was more somber, dressed in a gray suit despite the warmth, whose watchful eyes seemed less moved by admiration than by calculation. The town itself was in a festive mood. That weekend, a regatta, was to take place, bringing with it not only races but picnics, dances, and the mingling of high society with ordinary holidaymakers. As Poirot strolled later along the promenade, his small figure neat and exact amidst the chaos of children shrieking with delight, dogs barking, and vendors hawking seaside trinkets, he reflected on how often it was that beneath such scenes of gaiety lay an undercurrent of unease. At the bandstand, a brass orchestra played lively airs. Eleanor Harrington was there too, accompanied by her chaperone, a woman of stern demeanor named Mrs. Cartwright, who seemed to consider it her sole duty to shield Eleanor from too much attention. Judging by the sparkle of defiance in the girl's eyes, Poirot suspected Eleanor was not inclined to be shielded at all. Indeed, whispers already circulated. The Harrington family had chosen Holcombe-on-Sea not only for leisure, but also to avoid the unwanted gaze of London scandal sheets. It was rumored Eleanor was soon to be engaged, though to whom depended on which gossip one chose to believe. Some said the bronze sportsman, others insisted it was the severe man in gray. Neither had been granted official acknowledgement. To Poirot's mind, such uncertainties were the very soil from which dramas grew. He told himself firmly he was not here to investigate matters of the heart, only to enjoy the sea air and perhaps a walk upon the pier, where the scent of fried fish mingled with the salt breeze. 2 days later, during the regatta picnic upon the cliffs overlooking the bay, that illusion of peace was shattered. Guests gathered in their best attire, hampers opened, champagne corks popping, laughter carried upon the wind. It was Eleanor Harrington who rose to fetch a shawl from the motor car, parked a short distance away. It was Eleanor who did not return. At first, no one remarked upon her absence, for in such gatherings young women often wandered off. But when minutes stretched into half an hour and her place at the picnic blanket remained empty, unease began to ripple among the group. Poirot, present as a guest of the hotel manager, observed the reactions with his customary sharpness. The bronze young man leapt to his feet in alarm, while the man in gray rose more deliberately, his jaw set. Mrs. Cartwright muttered disapprovingly that Eleanor was most irresponsible. Eleanor's stepmother fluttered her handkerchief and declared the girl had simply gone to powder her nose. But when a search was organized and no trace of Eleanor could be found, neither along the cliff path, nor at the car, nor upon the winding descent to the beach below, the laughter that had filled the afternoon gave way to whispers of something far more sinister. By evening, when shadows lengthened and the chill of the sea crept into the anxious party, a discovery was made. A note lay folded upon the seat of the motor car Eleanor was meant to reach. It was addressed to her father in bold hand, demanding a ransom for her safe return. The sum was extravagant. The instructions were vague, but the implication was clear. Eleanor Harrington had been abducted. Sir Geoffrey, who had been due to arrive from London the next morning, was sent for by urgent telegram. The local constabulary was summoned. Even as others gave way to panic, Poirot remained thoughtful. He turned the note over in his gloved hand, noting the crispness of the fold, the deliberate choice of words, the curious absence of certain details any ordinary criminal might have included. It was, he reflected, a performance, a piece of theater upon which the curtain had only just risen. Thus, Hercule Poirot's holiday, so carefully designed to be free of exertion, was interrupted and transformed into the opening act of a drama whose true depths had yet to reveal themselves. The stage was set. The restless sea, the shifting sands, the fragile pretenses of the Harrington family, and the mystery of a vanished heiress whose fate was destined to haunt the shore. Chapter 2. The Vanishing Heiress. The following morning dawned with a sky of pale, delicate blue and the smell of salt drifting in from the sea, but there was no sense of leisure in the Marine Hotel that day. Where once the lobby had hummed with the cheerful bustle of summer visitors, it now echoed with anxious footsteps and hurried whispers. The news of Eleanor Harrington's disappearance had spread swiftly along the promenade, and by breakfast, Holcombe-on-Sea was already bristling with rumor. Some said she had eloped. Others insisted she had been seen speaking to a mysterious figure near the pier. A few, with more morbid appetites, suggested she had been taken by force. To Poirot, who sat quietly at a corner table with his coffee and croissants, such speculation was as noisy as the gulls wheeling overhead, distracting but revealing all the same. For in rumor lay truth, though rarely in the way people believed. Sir Geoffrey Harrington arrived from London before noon, his motor car pulling up with a flurry of dust and indignation. He was a tall man, square-shouldered and gruff, with the air of one accustomed to command. His expression was set in lines of rage and disbelief as he stormed into the hotel lounge, demanding answers from anyone within earshot. The ransom note was read aloud once more, its words stark and deliberate. £50,000. Place the money in a leather case by the old lighthouse at dusk. Do not contact the police. If you fail, the girl dies. Sir Geoffrey's hands trembled as he crushed the paper, but his voice, when he spoke, carried the cold fury of a man who believed his wealth could solve every problem. They shall have their money, he barked. Only let my daughter be returned to me. But Poirot, who had watched this performance with narrowed eyes, stepped forward with the courtesy of one seeking only to serve. Monsieur, forgive me, but it is most unwise to assume that obedience alone will secure the safety of Mademoiselle. Kidnappers, you see, they are rarely so dependable as the post. Sir Geoffrey glared at him, uncomprehending at first, until the manager of the Marine Hotel hastened to explain that this small, immaculate gentleman was none other than Hercule Poirot, the celebrated detective. A flicker of recognition softened Sir Geoffrey's expression, though not his temper. "Then you will assist us," he demanded. "You will find my Eleanor and bring her back." Poirot inclined his head with quiet gravity. "I will do my best, monsieur. But first I must observe and think." The local constabulary had already been summoned, though they approached the matter with the caution of men reluctant to disturb the dignity of their seaside town. Inspector Hughes, a broad-shouldered man with sandy hair and a sunburnt nose, met Poirot with a mixture of respect and suspicion. "We've dealt with ransom demands before," he said firmly. "Our procedure is sound." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, but procedure, it is like the sandcastle, is it not? Admirable to look upon, but easily washed away by the tide of human cunning." The inspector bristled, yet he listened, for Poirot had already begun to ask questions none had thought to raise. Why had Eleanor gone to the car alone, when a chaperone was so near? Why had the note been left in plain sight, as though intended to be discovered almost immediately? Why had the handwriting been bold, almost theatrical, rather than disguised? To Poirot's little gray cells, each of these details sang of artifice rather than chance. Meanwhile, Eleanor's absence was felt with increasing weight among those who had been closest to her in the days before. Mrs. Harrington, her stepmother, languished upon a chaise longue in the hotel drawing-room, declaring through dramatic tears that the poor girl had been far too trusting. Her tone, however, was curiously flat beneath the show of grief, and Poirot noted it. Mrs. Cartwright, the chaperone, remained stiff and severe, insisting that Eleanor must have strayed of her own accord, a comment that drew gasps from others who considered it heartless. As for the bronzed young man, introduced formally as Charles Mayfair, he spent the morning pacing the terrace, his hands raking through his hair as though he could not bear stillness. And the man in gray, identified as Mr. Alan Redfern, stood apart, watching with narrowed eyes and a silence that seemed almost accusatory. Poirot took it upon himself to speak with each of them, gently but persistently, coaxing out fragments of truth. Charles Mayfair admitted he had hoped to marry Eleanor, though her father had not approved of him. "She was spirited, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice breaking. "She longed for freedom. If she were to run away, it would not surprise me." Redfern, on the other hand, dismissed such notions. "Miss Harrington was not a woman of impulse. If she is gone, it is because someone desired her absence. Nothing more." His words were sharp, deliberate, and Poirot felt a curious weight in them, as though Redfern was speaking of more than mere circumstance. By afternoon, the town was alive with speculation, and the cliff paths swarmed with police and curious onlookers. A shawl belonging to Eleanor was found caught upon a thorn bush near the road, though whether it had been dropped in haste or placed there deliberately was impossible to say. Poirot examined it with fastidious care, noting the faint scent of perfume still clinging to the fabric. "It is not the object itself," he murmured, "but the manner in which it is left. Always one must ask, what is it that we are meant to believe?" Inspector Hughes frowned, muttering about evidence, but Poirot only tapped his temple. "Evidence, my friend, is often what the criminal wishes us to see." As dusk approached, the ransom deadline loomed. Sir Geoffrey, against advice, insisted upon preparing the sum demanded, and under heavy guard, he drove to the old lighthouse where the exchange was to take place. Poirot, though not officially invited, accompanied them, his eyes alert to every shadow upon the dunes. The lighthouse stood tall and weathered, its lantern unlit against the fading sun, and there, upon a flat rock, Sir Geoffrey placed the leather case filled with banknotes. They waited in silence, the sea lapping gently at the shore, the gulls calling overhead. Minutes passed, then an hour. Yet no figure approached, no sign of Eleanor appeared. The case remained untouched, glinting in the last of the daylight. At length, Sir Geoffrey erupted in fury, shouting that he had been tricked, that his daughter was lost forever. The police secured the case, inspecting it for clues, but found none. Poirot alone remained calm, his gaze fixed not upon the money but upon the darkening horizon. "Non, monsieur," he said softly. "Your daughter is not lost forever. She is here, somewhere close by. The question is not what the criminals have done, but what they intend us to think they have done." And though the others could not yet see it, Poirot felt in his bones that Eleanor's disappearance was not the work of common criminals. It was something far more calculated, far more intimate. The sea itself seemed to whisper of secrets yet to be revealed. When the company returned to the hotel, weary and disheartened, the night pressed heavy upon them. Lamps flickered along the promenade, and the waves struck the shore with monotonous rhythm, as though marking the passage of time. Poirot sat in the lounge, hands folded, mustache immaculate, eyes half closed. Around him, the voices of the grieving and the suspicious mingled in a chorus of fear. But in Poirot's mind, patterns had already begun to take shape. The note, the shawl, the rival suitors, the curious demeanor of the stepmother and chaperone. Each was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of deception. The Vanishing Heiress was not merely a victim. She was the center of a design whose edges Poirot had only just begun to trace. Chapter 3: Shadows over the Promenade. The next morning dawned clear, the waves brushing against the shore with deceptive calm. Poirot, immaculate in his gray suit despite the summer heat, walked along the promenade with Hastings. The town had a veneer of holiday cheer, bright parasols, families laughing, and fishermen unloading their early catches. But beneath it all, Poirot felt the unease of whispers spreading. A murder had been committed, and such things cling to small communities like a heavy fog. Hastings, eager to share his observations, remarked how everyone seemed suspicious. "Everyone looks guilty when you're looking for guilt, mon ami," Poirot replied quietly, his gaze fixed on a woman standing at the railing. It was Clara Redmond, her gloved hands trembling, staring into the sea as though it might give her answers. Poirot approached her gently, his voice calm, almost reassuring. Clara turned, her face pale but determined. "I know what people are saying, Monsieur Poirot, that Gerald and I quarreled, that I had reason to harm him. But I swear to you I would never." Poirot listened, nodding slightly, though his sharp eyes noted the details others would overlook. The slight bruise at her wrist, hastily concealed under lace, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to her gown, though she herself did not smoke. Hastings, ever blunt, asked directly if she knew who might have wanted Gerald dead. Clara's lips pressed together, as if locking away some dangerous truth. Gerald had secrets, and secrets make enemies. With that, she excused herself, leaving Poirot thoughtful. Later that afternoon, Poirot and Hastings paid a visit to Dr. Pembroke, the town physician who had first examined Gerald's body. Pembroke, a tall, stern man with a perpetual frown, confirmed that Gerald had not drowned by accident. There were signs of a struggle, bruises around the neck, water in the lungs, yes, but I'd wager he was forced under. Someone held him there. Hastings shifted uncomfortably, muttering about the brutality of it, but Poirot's mind worked differently. He pressed for more details, and Pembroke hesitated before adding, there was something else. A peculiar scent on Gerald's clothing, jasmine, strong, overpowering, as though he'd been very near someone who wore it. Poirot filed the detail away, his gray eyes glinting with new suspicion. The evening brought a gathering at the Seaside Hotel where most of the principal figures were staying. The lounge was tense, polite conversation layered with suspicion. The journalist, Mr. Carlyle, lingered near the bar, always scribbling in his little notebook. Miss Lillian Hargreaves, sharp-tongued as ever, whispered venomously about Clara's supposed temper, ensuring every ear caught her words. And then there was Harold Finch, Gerald's business partner, whose nervous energy betrayed more than simple grief. Poirot observed them all from his corner, sipping hot chocolate. "Do you notice, Hastings," he murmured, "how quickly the tongues wag when there is death? It is like the tide, relentless, sweeping all before it." Hastings frowned, muttering that it was all rather indecent, but Poirot was already analyzing connections, weaving patterns from fragments. At one point during the evening, Poirot caught Finch slipping away quietly. With Hastings at his side, they followed discreetly into the narrow streets behind the hotel. Finch entered a dimly lit boarding house, meeting with a man neither of them recognized, rough-looking, with the air of a smuggler or sailor. The two spoke in low tones, their words indistinct, but Poirot caught fragments. "That's shipment," Gerald found out. Moments later, Finch left, his face pale, his hand shaking as he lit a cigarette. Poirot, satisfied with the small revelation, turned to Hastings. "You see, mon ami, the good Gerald was not only a man of leisure. He stumbled upon something most inconvenient to others." Hastings, baffled, pressed for answers, but Poirot only smiled faintly, saying, "All in good time." As the night drew in, Poirot returned to his room, his little gray cells buzzing. He laid out the facts so far. Gerald was wealthy, but perhaps not so innocent. He had secrets, business dealings perhaps unsavory, enemies lurking in the shadows. Clara, the grieving widow, carried hidden bruises and unspoken truths. Finch, desperate and fearful, entangled with rough company. The scent of jasmine, a clue pointing towards someone unseen or someone hiding in plain sight. "Yes," Poirot whispered to himself, arranging his thoughts like chess pieces. "The picture begins to form, but the canvas is not yet complete. There is more, much more, to uncover." Outside, the sea roared against the rocks, as though echoing the violence that had claimed Gerald Redmond's life. Chapter 4. The Unmasking at Dawn. The night passed in uneasy silence. The little town of Seabridge, which had once bustled with cheerful summer holiday makers, now felt draped in a blanket of dread. In the hotel, whispers moved from room to room, speculation buzzing like flies in the air. Poirot, however, sat calmly in the drawing lounge long after midnight, his fingertips pressed together, eyes half closed, as though drifting between wakefulness and deep contemplation. Hastings fidgeted nearby, sipping at a lukewarm cup of tea that had long lost its comfort. "You can't honestly expect to stay awake all night, Poirot," Hastings muttered. Poirot smiled softly without opening his eyes. "It is not the body, mon ami, that I ask to remain awake. It is the mind. The little gray cells, they do not sleep when the truth is so close at hand." Morning broke with a dull, gray light, the kind of dawn that carries no warmth but instead casts everything in a pallid hue. Poirot gathered everyone in the hotel's conservatory, a glass-walled space overlooking the restless sea. The waves crashed with unusual violence, as if nature itself knew a revelation was coming. The suspects gathered reluctantly. The grieving widow, her face pale but eyes watchful. The hotel manager, wringing his hands nervously. The maid Elsie, twisting her apron, and the doctor, stoic but tense, his gaze darting between them all. Hastings glanced at Poirot nervously. This was it, the moment. Poirot began with quiet authority. "Mess Amos, a terrible crime has been committed here at Seabridge. Mr. Davenport was not taken from this world by accident or by nature. He was murdered, and among us now sits the one responsible." A gasp rippled through the group. Mrs. Davenport clutched her shawl tighter, her breath coming in short bursts. Poirot's tone sharpened. The method was subtle. Poison, yes, but not introduced by food or wine. Rather, through the inhalation of vapors released in the victim's very room. A chemical placed in the grate, designed to emit when warmed by the fire. He let the words hang in the air. Shock washed across their faces. Hastings leaned closer, whispering urgently. "But Poirot, how could you know this?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The ashes, mon ami. They told me more than words ever could." Turning back to the group, Poirot's gaze fixed on the doctor. "Dr. Whitmore, only a medical man with knowledge of compounds could arrange such a death without arousing immediate suspicion. Yet, you did not anticipate the cleverness of the ashes that betray you." The doctor's jaw tightened. "That's outrageous," he snapped. "You can't simply accuse me without proof." Poirot nodded gravely. "Proof you shall have. I visited your private cabinet in the surgery, Doctor. Hastings can confirm. He accompanied me. And there, hidden behind the bottles of tonics, I discovered a small vial of phosphorus compound. Enough to cause the symptoms we observed in Mr. Davenport. Enough to kill." The silence was deafening. Then Mrs. Davenport spoke, her voice trembling. "But why? Why would the doctor harm my husband?" Poirot's eyes softened, though his words were deliberate. "Because of love, madam. A love that twisted into desperation. The doctor was in love with you. He believed your husband to be cruel, to stand in the way of your happiness. And so he sought to free you." The widow recoiled, her face crumpling with horror. "No, I never. I had no idea." The doctor's composure cracked. Sweat glistened on his brow. "He didn't deserve her," he muttered hoarsely. "He treated her as property. I thought I could save her." Poirot's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Murder, monsieur, is never salvation. It is only destruction. And though your motives were the mask of affection, the truth is far darker. You robbed a man of life, and you stained love with blood." The doctor's shoulders slumped, as though the weight of his crime had finally crushed him. The maid sobbed quietly. The hotel manager turned away, unable to watch. Hastings exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and sorrow. The constable, who had been summoned by Poirot earlier, stepped forward to take the doctor into custody. As the door closed behind the arrested man, the conservatory seemed to grow brighter, as though the very air had shifted. Mrs. Davenport stood frozen, staring at the floor, her world now fractured by betrayal and grief. Poirot, ever gentle, approached her. "Courage, madam. In time, you will see that the truth, though painful, is always preferable to the shadow of lies." She gave a faint nod, tears streaking her cheeks. When the room had emptied, Hastings turned to Poirot, shaking his head. "You astound me, old chap. Every time I think you cannot possibly surprise me, you do. But tell me, what gave him away? What made you certain it was the doctor?" Poirot smiled faintly, gazing out at the churning sea. "It was not one thing, Hastings, but many. The misplaced grief, the subtle avoidance of certain questions, the chemistry that only a trained man could wield. Murder, mon ami, always leaves its trace. It is only a matter of listening very carefully." Hastings gave a low whistle, admiration and awe in his tone. And so the case drew to a close, not with triumph, but with the solemn truth revealed. The Seaside Hotel, once merely a place of leisure, now stood as a reminder that even in the most peaceful of settings, human hearts could harbor storms far greater than those that raged upon the sea. Chapter 5. The Final Curtain. The dawn broke quietly over the small seaside town, the tide pulling back with a sigh as though the sea itself was weary of secrets. Poirot, ever immaculate, stood near the veranda of the Blue Gull Hotel, the morning light casting a pale glow across his features. The night had been long, filled with confessions, confrontations, and the careful peeling back of lies. And now, with all the pieces aligned neatly within the sharp mind of Hercule Poirot, the time had come to reveal the truth. The guests had been gathered once more in the lounge. The air was heavy, not just with salt and sea breeze, but with anticipation. Some sat rigid, others fidgeted nervously, and a few wore the false calm of those trying desperately to mask their fear. Poirot took his place in the center of the room, his hands folded delicately over his silver-tipped cane. His mustache twitched ever so slightly as he looked around, each pair of eyes betraying guilt, fear, or dread. "My friends," Poirot began softly, his Belgian accent deliberate and soothing, "the time has come to strip away the shadows that have cloaked this dreadful affair. Murder, you see, is never simple. It is not merely the extinguishing of a life, but the destruction of trust, of peace, of the natural order. And yet, no matter how clever the murderer, the truth always leaves its trace. It is like the tide, pulling back, revealing what is hidden in the sand." He paced gently, his steps deliberate, as he recounted the story. The arrival of the guests, the strained glances at the dinner table, the late-night quarrels, the secret trysts by the shore. Each detail he unveiled felt like the tightening of a net, drawing the guilty party closer to exposure. He spoke of motive, opportunity, and, finally, of the small inconsistencies that only the little gray cells could perceive. The room grew tense as Poirot turned sharply, his finger raised. "The murderer, Amos, is none other than—" He let the silence hang for a moment, the room frozen in suspense. "The one who thought themselves clever enough to outwit not only the law, but Hercule Poirot. And yet, as we see, the cleverness was but an illusion." Gasps filled the air as the truth landed with the weight of a crashing wave. The guilty one, pale and trembling, could no longer maintain the mask. The evidence laid bare, the motive undeniable, their composure crumbled. A confession spilled forth, twisted by desperation, but sealed with the finality of truth. Poirot watched calmly, neither gloating nor cruel, but with the quiet dignity of justice restored. Outside, the gulls cried over the sea, the waves rolling endlessly against the shore. Within the lounge, a heavy silence lingered before being replaced by a collective exhale. Justice, though painful, had been done. Poirot smoothed his mustache and turned toward the window, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It is done," he murmured, "and may the soul of the departed rest, now that truth has prevailed." He left the guests to their thoughts, their whispers, their shame, and their relief. As he stepped into the sunlight, the seaside town seemed to breathe again. The air felt lighter, the horizon broader. Poirot, ever the solitary figure, walked with measured grace down the promenade, his mind already moving beyond this case, toward mysteries yet unseen. For while one story had ended, he knew well that another would soon begin, as surely as the tide would return. And so, the seaside murder was solved, not with violence, but with clarity, patience, and the quiet brilliance of Hercule Poirot. If you enjoyed this mystery with Hercule Poirot, make sure to stay with us for the next case, another tale of secrets, lies, and the little gray cells at work. Subscribe now, so you don't miss the unraveling of the next puzzle. And remember, in every shadow, in every whisper, there's always more than meets the eye. Stay curious, stay sharp, and join us again for another mystery soon.